Hey, fellow humans, welcome to Unraveling the Shoulds. You know all of those stories in our minds that are built upon who we thought we should be? Well, we're going to unravel those. We're going to journey into the quiet magic of everyday life. Those moments where each small thought holds a thread that can unravel the story of who we thought we were. As those threads fall away, what emerges is our mountaintop self. The true soul of us that is vast and free and whole. Through myth, philosophy, and lived experience, we'll discuss and walk this path together, unraveling into the truth, remembering who we've always been. How about we finally stop shoulding all over ourselves?
You and I have obviously talked a lot about yoga, since that's kind of the first connecting point that we had was yoga. How has your view of yoga evolved as you have evolved, and how would you even start that conversation, like within the context of a yoga class, of differentiating between physical asana and the yoga that kind of goes beyond that?
I think it starts with understanding all of the ways that could get you in the door, meaning many people will look for yoga because of fitness, especially if it's been kind of homogenized and it's come to you through that lens of wanting something different than the gym. It could be as simple as that. In that case, it many times comes through word of mouth, or you were interested in it, or you saw it on Instagram and it's this other thing you haven't tried. For me, it was somewhat unique in the way that I found yoga through suffering, in the fact that when I was in my 20s and my mother was ill, I found it very difficult to be present with her. I was very worried and very, just so many appointments and all of these things that used to take up so much of my time. And so I actually found meditation first as a potential to be more present with my mom while she was sick. That was really my intention. Was I didn't feel as if I was very present with her. I was always worried when I was around her or navigating schedules and appointments. And I just wanted, if this illness was going to be something that was going to limit our time together, I wanted to be as present with her as possible. And so I think the first thing I ever read was The Power of Now, and a book by Eckhart Tolle that really suggested presence and meditation and definitely yoga. And that kind of was the little spark that lit the flame. And not only did I start to develop a meditation practice, it just really helped me be present in my life, not only as my mom was ill, but also in just navigating things with more awareness. So then came the physical part of it that went, oh, there's this physical practice that's also associated with this mindfulness or presence or awareness. And as soon as that component came in, it was like an intuitive click that said, not only am I going to learn everything about this, but I'm going to teach it. So if I talk about like an impact moment in my life, it would be the illness and the death of my mom that catapulted me into a different life, into a different way of practicing life, into a yogic lifestyle that certainly isn't my culture. I didn't know anything about it other than being very, very interested in religion and philosophy as I was growing up. So it hit all of those aspects for me. And then it completely changed my life as I actually came away from the asana and more into the 8 limbs and more into the understanding of it as a lifestyle. So there's so many ways that people can find their way in the door. Mine came meditation, asana, self-awareness, empowerment, and the yogic lifestyle.
I don't think I knew that about like your starting point with yoga or meditation, really. And that's so interesting because I had the opposite path, where first it was like I was so into the physical exertion of sport that that without any awareness, it ran my body to the ground, and I had to have a surgery. And it was after that surgery where I realized I couldn't do that same sport anymore. And I was like, well, I guess I should slow it down and do something else. And so, having already been interested in religion and philosophy and all of those things, I was like, I guess yoga kind of makes sense. But I practice it with this mindset of like needing to heal my body because I had no physical awareness up until that point. I had enough lack of awareness that I hurt myself. And then I was like, I never do that again. Like, I am really young. Like, this was when I was 22. And I was like, I can't believe that this happened. Like, I really need to build up some body awareness because I've clearly been quite disconnected. So for me, it was like using the body as the method for awareness, because it was actually, I think, the first time that I like came into my body really and was like sitting in presence. But maybe that's kind of like the similar entry point is presence, because through my body I was like, wow, I don't think I've ever moved with my breath and felt being alive, really, because I'm always thinking about everything else besides this moment. And so, yeah, I think that's a very cool, like, coming in opposite directions, but then meeting in this like pain of a shared experience.
Yeah, that sameness that yoga almost guarantees that we'll find our way to the top of that mountain. And if you apply and verify its offering, and whichever pathway you take is beautiful and unique, and it's important and it's special for you. And I love the way that yoga honors that. And it seems we were both in a place where we were out of our bodies. My sitting in meditation, I would echo that the same thing. I started to actually be able to feel my emotions. I mean, they were all there, but I was just projecting them out or taking other people's personally. And so meditation and that stillness really just almost forced that personal responsibility, that when there's nobody else in the room and you're sitting in the dark, I don't know who you're going to blame anymore. And so it was just this radical feeling that this all belongs to me. Now, it's different than this being my fault, the feelings and the emotions and my mother being so sick, and just being able to feel all of that. It was just very powerful. And when you're alone in that, or when it's only you, yoga gives you a beautiful opportunity to just own it all. And then you can begin to transform it, because the world and the external environment will give you countless things to put it on, to project it onto, and to not take responsibility for it. The world will show up in amazing ways to allow you to think it's them or it's it. It's the world, it's not you. Yeah. So that really, it just changed my life. And then once that happens, as you can probably attest, some people try yoga and they're like, meh. For me, it was so fast in the shift that I just was like head first after that.
Like, in order for that healing to happen, do you think that it requires an openness, or do you think that it will like come for you no matter what? Because, like, for example, the other day I had this conversation where someone was like, oh, I invited someone to a class, like a yoga class. I was like, oh, we should do yoga together. And they were like, well, I'll come to a yoga class when you start doing this activity that I want you to do. And I was like, no. I said, no, that's not how it works. Because if there's no desire, then it doesn't work on you. It's like you have this shell that protects you. You become impenetrable if you're not open for it.
Right. The willingness is absolutely everything. Otherwise, you're walking into a yoga class to confirm that yoga is not your thing. Like, without the desire, without the willingness, without the openness.
Or curiosity.
Right. So if you're going, well, if you go rock climbing, I'll go to yoga. And there's no passion or desire around learning rock climbing, speaking for myself, then I would likely just be going to prove that it wasn't my thing. Versus watching somebody doing rock climbing and having a vested interest and willingness to push through my own boundaries to be able to build that kind of strength and blah, blah, blah. The willingness is the portal. Without it, to your point, you have this layer that that basically says, I already know this. There's no curiosity. There's no playfulness. So, that's how patterning works. If I've already said in my brain that this is anything isn't for me, then me stepping towards it would be to just prove that it's not. As soon as you go, wait, this isn't for me, ? And the curiosity starts to open up another portal, which is change, which is the only thing we know that for certain is that everything is going to change and it's constant. Then we have the susceptibility to grow. Otherwise, we stay in the same little pot that we've been safe in for many years. And yoga wouldn't even say that's wrong. It would just say that's counterproductive if your intention is growth and change. So I'd say yes, willingness. And then many, many times I tell my clients, if you're not interested in continuing awakening, stay off your mat. Because once you've stepped on to that, not the physical practice. Yes, the physical practice many times is going to be the thing that gets you there because you've added breath to movement, which increases prana. And once you increase your prana, you increase your life force. And once you increase your life force, you increase your self-awareness. And once you increase your self-awareness, it's just like this beautiful ripple effect that happens when I always say give it 3 chances. 3 times into yoga, apply and verify, you're probably hooked. Because something else happens in yoga that doesn't happen at the gym. Because you're being guided into that movement of prana, that life force that hasn't touched your left knee for 30 years, and then it does. And then it starts to awaken why the knee has hurt all that time, which is trauma. Not necessarily physical trauma when you fell on your bike, but trauma from the living room with your parents. Now we're starting to move some of that out. And then yoga goes, oh, hey, while I have your attention, how about we change your whole life?
Well, that's almost different than what you said before, which I think is so interesting because it's like, okay, yes, there is obviously that layer of willingness, but then at the same time, the practice in and of itself does kind of, well, it has all of that potential. Yeah, it like all of a sudden opens this door in front of you where I think that you can look at the door and say, nope, and completely keep on your track and not acknowledge it. But I think that would take a very active no, because yeah, like you're saying, if you're feeling something physically for the first time, like the knee to the elbow, and plus the breath, plus this kind of uncomfortable silence, plus this invitation to soften and relax and awaken, and all of these invitations, like maybe that's really what yoga as a physical practice, bottom baseline is in a class setting, is like an invitation.
100%.
Which actually I've never thought of before. And that's really, I think, a nice like mindset to have going into it, because then it leaves both people in a safe place of like, I'm just inviting you. And they're like, well, I'm just saying no. And then they go off.
That RSVP is a no for me. No, and I think that's exactly what yoga does. So you would have to have a pretty strong preconceived notion of what yoga is already, probably what it isn't, in order to not walk through the door, right? You would have to have, usually many times we'll say it would be a religious connotation. That's why a lot of yoga instructors would say that yoga is not religious, of which I would say yoga is the oldest tradition on earth, which is rooted in deep spirituality and many, many, many gods. So we can't really otherwise just call it stretching. But if you're going to call it yoga, it does have a deep spiritual core to it. And so that many times may preclude somebody from walking through the door because their box or their exclamation point is already too driven in. But if you're interested in self-awareness, in a spiritual practice, into spiritual awakening, into what that even means, I mean, I don't know. I haven't practiced or been in any other system that's made it so gentle and so beautiful and so accessible and so easy, because it's not driven by a moral compass. It's not driven by you have to do this or else. It's driven by apply and verify. Apply this breath to your life and verify that it has calmed your stress. Apply this movement to your body and verify that it has given you more room to move. And as I started to go through the philosophy and the 8 limbs, and I mean, that's why there's several different paths. So you can go, oh, it didn't work for you in this way. What about trying it over here? Right? So yeah. And then it just becomes this beautiful gateway if you allow it, because you could be a physical asana, fitness driven yoga instructor in California. And that's the only thing that you focus on. You could make a lot of money and you could pack every class. There's certainly a niche for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say it barely scratches the surface of what yoga really is and has to offer.
Yeah. Obviously, you just started teaching a Saturday morning class again after a long time of not teaching regularly on Saturdays or any day of the week. So I am curious what it was that drew you back to a regular public class.
Well, I'm going to get real deep real quick, probably. Where we are in what I believe is the expansion of human consciousness on the planet and the pivotal place that we as a collective find ourselves, I feel as if I have the voice that can help to bring a lot of those polarities that a lot of people might be struggling with to the center. And that's not my responsibility as much as it is an honor to be able to offer a non-reactive, non-triggered, very active way of participating in our world right now as it struggles to find some sense of equilibrium so that we can rebirth ourselves into something more sustainable for the planet. Because I think we're going to need each other more and more and more in the coming months and years. And if I can be a loving word or a loving safe space, then it's my honor to do so.
I was listening this morning to the astrology of the week with Chani, and I think that there is a lot of talk about cruelty in the world, and there is a lot of cruelty. The more that I hear it and the more that we hear it about the cruelty, it's like it's like that apply and verify thing of like, there's cruelty in the world? Yes, there is. And like, that's not a very good question. The question is the opposite question, and this is maybe where like that polarity kind of finds its center, is like, okay, is there a lot of cruelty? Apply and verify. We'll find an answer. But on the other side of that, it's like, is there a lot of kindness? And is there a lot of communal support? Do people have each other's backs? Do I have people's backs? As like an individual person, do other people have my back, and am I thanking them for it? And I think between those two polarities, it's like, yeah, I don't know where exactly the center is, but it does feel like the question itself is like a very important part of the conversation.
Yes. To make space for the strength that I have to protest might look more like a community garden than yelling in the street. And to be able for us to prioritize our nervous systems right now, to be able to prioritize our nervous systems would mean to focus on the things that you're just talking about, to focus on your neighbor, to make sure that old lady makes it across the street, to say something kind and beautiful when you are intuitively guided to do so. There are lots of ways to rebel against cruelty, primarily by identifying where cruelty might still live in your own mind against yourself, and B, to behave the opposite of that every single day, whether it's at the grocery store, a yoga class, or at a protest, is that we're prioritizing the opposite of what we are. We just have to be careful what we're glorifying, right? Like you said, apply and verify. Cruelty is in the world. So we can defend a limitation, which would mean let's look at the cruelty and figure out whose fault it is and thus try to fight it, which doesn't feel calm to my nervous system. Or I can identify where there still may be cruelty through judgment, comparison within my own mind, and then heal that and ask my neighbor if she's okay since her husband's been in the hospital. These are ways that we are rebelling against the patriarchy, that we are rising in the divine feminine, that the phoenix is ready to cultivate. It doesn't always have to look like fighting against the thing that isn't working anyway, which is fighting. And I completely understand how in our world right now that can feel too passive to some people, in which case I'd say get out your signs and do what you need to do in order to face that. But for the sensitive creative whose nervous system can't handle a mob of people screaming at each other, I would suggest the latter. So,
yeah. Well, thank you for this brief chat.
How fun.
You're a beautiful, beautiful soul.
I love you so much. You're my little mirror out there in the world.
Thank you so much for joining us in the initial conversations that became the foundation for unraveling the shoulds. We invite you to continue this journey along with us each week as we dive deeper into our truest selves.